Welcome to Diamonds in Dumpster Fires. I'm Melly, and this is the podcast for people who are determined to find a glimmer of hope even while the fires of life are burning around them. Together, we'll dumpster dive through all sorts of topics like divorce, dating, friendships, grief, career ups and downs, and so much more. All with a sense of humor and absolutely no toxic positivity. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello and welcome to another episode of Diamonds in Dumpster Fires. Today's episode is Shattering Superstitions, the truth about luck, faith, and resilience. And if you're wondering why in the world am I talking about superstitions today, well, this just happens to be episode number 13 of the podcast. And so, as we all know, number 13 is often considered the unlucky number. So if my microphone suddenly stops working or my coffee spills all over my notes, well, maybe we can conclude that 13 really is cursed. And I know that for some of you, you're probably thinking that me talking about superstition on a faith-based podcast is a little crazy. I mean, it is a little bit of a taboo topic, right? But do you believe in luck? Do you have any superstitions, no matter how ridiculous you might actually believe they are? Do you ever knock on wood, avoid Friday the 13th, or think that bad things happen in threes? You don't have to answer that right now, but just stick with me through this episode, and I think you'll see there's some interesting things going on when we deal with superstition, luck, faith, and resilience. According to a study that was conducted by YouGov in 2019, most Americans aren't actually all that superstitious, so that's pretty great news, right? In fact, only 9% of people surveyed referred to themselves as very superstitious. Now, while 31% said they were not superstitious at all, 35% of those surveyed said they were not very superstitious, which means they'd probably agree with Michael Scott from The Office when he said, "I'm not superstitious, but I am a little stitious." And let's face it, whether we have real superstitions or not, or if we get caught up in things like good or bad luck, we all give in to this idea at times, believers or not. In fact, did you know that the fear of Friday the 13th supposedly has roots in Christianity? Yep, I didn't know that either until I started researching for this podcast. But the theory goes that during the Last Supper, there were 13 guests, the 13th, of course, being, dun dun dun, Judas, and we know that dude was bad news. Now, there are a few other theories as to why Friday the 13th is, just ripe with superstition, but I thought that one was pretty interesting. So today's episode is going to dive into this truth. Superstitions are based on fear and control. Faith and resilience are based on trust and action. And I will say that one more time for the people in the back. Superstitions are based on fear and control. Faith and resilience are based on trust and action. We'll start this off with talking about superstition. Why do we believe in it? Why does it have such a hold on us? Because let's be real. Even if we say we don't believe in superstitions, plenty of us will still knock on wood just in case. And to give you a personal story, I don't consider myself a superstitious person at all. But I will admit that I do have a little bit of a fear walking under ladders. To be honest, some of that fear is real because the last time I tried to just walk past a ladder, I actually knocked it over and made a bloody mess of my foot, literally ripping one of my toenails off. Sorry for the gross story. And that had absolutely nothing to do with luck and everything to do with bad depth perception, my ADHD clumsiness, and not paying close enough attention to my surroundings. However, when I see a ladder now, you better believe I walk way far away from it. But why do we do this? Why do people avoid Friday the 13th? Why do people carry Lucky Charms or refuse to open an umbrella indoors? Superstitions exist because we want to believe that we can control the uncontrollable. Life is unpredictable, and instead of accepting that, we often will create these little rules to try to make sense of it. For example, if I wear my lucky socks, my job interview will go well. If I don't jinx myself, things won't go wrong. If I check the horoscope, I'll know what kind of day I'm going to have, and I hope none of you are doing that. But here's the problem. Superstition is based on fear, not faith. It tells us that if we don't follow the rules, bad things will happen. Faith, on the other hand, says, even if things don't go my way, it's going to be okay. It's easier to blame bad luck sometimes than take ownership. And I know that's kind of a hard thing to hear, but can we be honest and say that that's true? Sometimes if we just call something bad luck, it's easier than acknowledging patterns that we need to break, things that are going wrong in our lives because of us. For example, if every relationship that I get into ends in disaster, isn't it easier to say, it must be me, I'm just cursed, and not say, maybe I need to work on my boundaries, or my picker might be off and I'm choosing the wrong people to date, or, if I'm struggling with money, isn't it a lot easier to say, oh, it's because I have really bad luck when it comes to employment and money and investments, and not say, hey, I need to make some changes in my financial habits. Of course, I'm not saying that everything that happens to us is our fault, because life definitely throws curveballs that sometimes just seem to come out of nowhere. But calling it bad luck will only keep us stuck. Blaming luck or fate removes our power in the situation, but choosing faith and resilience will give it back to us. And even more importantly, choosing faith allows us to put our trust in God. And in case you're wondering, the Bible doesn't talk about luck at all. Nowhere in the Bible is luck mentioned, only faith, wisdom, and God's plan. Proverbs 3:5-6 does not say, trust your lucky number. It says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Romans 8:28 doesn't say, good things happen to lucky people. It says, in all things, God works for the good of those who love him. So if we're walking in faith, we don't have to worry about silly things like stepping on a crack or breaking a mirror, because nothing is outside of God's plan, and God certainly doesn't need a four-leaf clover to bless you. Now, the flip side of that is that yes, bad things do happen. Sometimes, when life is just throwing all this stuff at us, it can be so easy to think, wow, I must just be under some curse or just have really bad luck. But the thing is, good things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people. On the flip side of that, bad things sometimes happen to bad people, and bad things, unfortunately, sometimes happen to good people too. So just because things are not going your way does not at all mean that you are an unlucky person or that, you've been singled out for cursing or anything like that. It just means that this is the time when you're going through it, and that is unfortunately something that all of us have to deal with. But what about those times when life really does feel cursed? When it's not just one thing going wrong or a couple things going wrong, but everything seems to be going wrong and we're convinced that we're trapped in some kind of unlucky streak. Well, we're going to talk about that next, because a lot of times what we actually think of as bad luck is actually just our brain's own filter at work. So the problem is coming from inside the house, and we're going to talk about why. So let's talk about when life feels cursed, breaking that cycle of supposed bad luck, and why we see what we expect. We're going to spend some time now talking about something called the Reticular Activating System. And from this point on, I'm just going to call it the RAS, because Reticular Activating System, while very fun to say, is a mouthful. Have you ever noticed that when you start thinking about something, like a certain car, a song, or even a random word, it suddenly seems to show up everywhere? This is not magic. It's definitely not anything to do with luck. And for those listening that are into things like manifestation and all that, I hate to break it to you, but it has nothing to do with that either. It's actually your RAS doing its job. What do I mean? This is the non-scientific explanation of this, just kind of the, you think of it like the Cliff Notes definition of the RAS. But the RAS is a filter in your brain that decides what information is important and what can be ignored. Our brains process an overwhelming amount of sensory input every second. And if our brains didn't filter some of that stuff out, we would be completely overwhelmed. So what happens is we have this RAS that acts like a personal assistant, and it highlights what we tell it to focus on. So, a lot of times you'll hear this described as, if you start thinking about red cars, then all of a sudden you'll start seeing all the red cars everywhere because the red cars are always there. You're not creating those red cars. You're not making them, drive past you. But your reticular activating system is looking for the red cars because you've told your brain, I want to see red cars. So how does this connect to bad luck and superstition? Well, let's say you wake up, you go to your coffee maker, you pour yourself a perfect cup of coffee, you're ready to start your day, have an amazing day, and as you're walking back to the couch or the table, wherever you drink your coffee, you spill it everywhere. Your day is ruined, right? Immediately, you think, great, today is going to be one of those days. You're in a bad mood. And at this point now, your RAS is activated to look for every little thing that goes wrong. Could be a traffic jam, a rude email, could be dropping your phone. Every time something frustrating happens, your brain is going to flag it as proof that today is terrible because that is what you told it to focus on. What about the good things that happen that day? They're still there. You just aren't noticing them because your RAS isn't focused on them. This is how superstitions work too. If you believe Friday the 13th is unlucky, you'll unconsciously notice everything that goes wrong that day. Your internet could be glitching. You might be running late. You forget your grocery list. Someone who was supposed to call you forgets to call. Your brain just starts collecting all this evidence to confirm your belief, even though the same types of things happen on the supposedly lucky days too. And let me just say, I am the queen of letting my RAS just kind of run wild with me in, the negative sense. I am, a lot of people in my family would tell you, oh, if something bad's going to happen, it's going to happen to me. And that's because for a long time, I hate to admit it, but yeah, I would look for the bad things. I would go, get on a plane and just think, oh, this whole thing is just going to be horrible. And sure enough, I would have an experience that was just like out there. Meanwhile, a family member who is on a plane every week, sometimes several times a week, would say something like, I've never had anything like that happen. Why did it happen to me? Because I'm looking for it, right? Here's the thing, though. There is good news in all of this because you can train your RAS to work in your favor. So how do you do that? Number 1, start looking for blessings instead of bad luck. When you intentionally focus on blessings and you have a heart of gratitude, your RAS is going to start noticing what's going right instead of focusing on what's going wrong. You'll be able to actually see those little God moments, those moments of grace that you might have overlooked before. I say this pretty much every episode, and I probably will continue to do so, but I really, truly believe in the practice of having a gratitude journal. Because when you take a pen, and you can do it digitally as well, but when you actually write down 3, 4, 5 things that you are grateful for at the beginning of your day, you're going to start your day focused on what's going right. Your RAS is going to be like, all right, we're looking for good things today. So, I will put sometimes the silliest things into my gratitude journal. I might say, I'm thankful for fluffy socks or whatever, depending on, if it's cold outside, or I'm thankful for my air conditioning on the days when it's hot. But I will focus on these little things that can sometimes be very easy to take for granted. And then my RAS is going to start looking for those little things, as the day progresses. I'm going to see things where it seems like, God was in this moment. And in addition to having a gratitude journal, another thing that I have is a prayer journal. So I have this 5-year prayer journal, and I absolutely love it. I'm in year 2 of this current one. And basically what it is every day you write out a prayer. and then it's sectioned by the actual day of the month, and then you fill in the year and put in your prayer for that day. And the cool thing is, once you get to years 2, 3, 4, 5, you actually can see the prayers that you wrote, that same day of the month, but the previous year. And I'll tell you something. There have been multiple times where I prayed about something and it came about in a positive way. And as the year went on, I completely forgot about it. But having it in that written form and then seeing it again when I open up this prayer journal is another way that I intentionally focus on the good, and my RAS then notices those things going forward. So what's another way that we can train our RAS to work in our favor? Number 2 is to reframe setbacks as setups. What do I mean? Well, instead of thinking, I have the worst luck, everything bad always happens to me, try instead asking, how is God working in this situation? What lesson can I learn from this? Your brain will start searching for lessons and growth and even humor in those tough moments if you teach yourself to reframe your thoughts. And I say teach yourself because it is a skill and everybody can do it. And it is very important when it comes to resilience to do this because we want to be people that can look at a setback and think, how can I move forward in this? Another way we can train our RAS to work in our favor is to feed our faith, not our fear. So the more you focus on truth, hope, and resilience, the more your RAS will highlight those in your daily life. This is why renewing your mind, Romans 12:2 is so powerful. We literally can rewire our brain. So how do we feed our faith instead of feeding into fear? Well, number 1, read scripture. Memorize scripture. Have a basis of scripture that that in those moments when your brain is telling you all these things, and you're heading down that path of negativity, that you can stop, take a pause, even tell that to yourself. Say, time out, and recite to yourself one of the scriptures that you've memorized. If you don't have any scriptures memorized or if memorization is hard for you, no worries. You can get scripture anywhere on your phone. It's available on apps. You could just do a Google search and find those verses that will help you renew your mind. Romans 12:2, as I said before, is a great one for that. So the next time that you're tempted to think, I'm just unlucky, stop, ask yourself, could it be that my RAS is focusing on negativity? You might just realize that your life isn't actually a series of unfortunate events. It's really a story of resilience and growth and unexpected blessings. So how do you break real-life bad luck cycles? Because I think for a lot of people, especially if you are going through a dumpster fire right now, it can feel like you get kind of stuck in these cycles, right? For example, toxic relationships. If you keep attracting the same type of heartbreak, just recognize it really isn't luck. It's a pattern that needs healing. So what you can do is look, open-mindedly at your piece of that. So for example, I've had to do this in my own dating life. I keep saying, only guys that I meet are emotionally unavailable. And I've had to really take a step back and look at that and see what is it that I'm doing that is bringing these emotionally unavailable men into my life, because it is just causing all kinds of chaos for me, right? Because I get into these situationships, some of them lasting a long time, and I end up getting hurt in the end. But, and this is not to, let the guys off the hook. There are guys out there that will just kind of drag things along with women, and women do this to men too. This isn't just bashing on men here. But I do have a part in it. And if I am attracting those same types of heartbreaks into my life over and over, I need to look at what am I doing and what do I need to heal within myself so that I can move past that. Another way that, real life sort of bad luck cycles come about is with self-sabotage. Things like procrastination, fear, avoidance. Sometimes it's easier to say, it just wasn't in the cards for me, or fate is against me, right? But that's not what it is. It's a mindset shift waiting to happen. Or sometimes we get stuck in a cycle of fear. We have a fear of starting over. We'll say things to ourselves like, I can't start over because I'll just fail again. Or I can't start the job search again. It went so poorly last time. Or, in my case, I can't get on the dating apps again. What a dumpster fire. That's fear speaking. Faith says try anyway. And that doesn't mean that you have to try doing the exact same thing that you have done before. As we've all heard, the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So maybe it means doing something differently. Maybe, in my case with the dating, Faith says try dating anyway, but maybe don't go on the apps. Maybe do in-person events or, try to meet someone through church groups or something of that nature. So it doesn't mean that we have to just stay in the same cycle. In fact, we shouldn't. But don't have a fear of stepping out because you think you might fail. Because what if you actually succeed, right? So now let's talk a little bit about how do we flip the script? How do we find joy even in those unlucky moments when life is just kind of, going crazy for us? Honestly, humor and gratitude is going to be your best bet. And I know that you cannot just sit there and laugh at everything bad that happens to you, and I would never suggest that. I'm not crazy. But sometimes humor and laughter is just what your heart needs. And I know I've already said it, but gratitude. Think about this. I'm sure most of us have a story or some kind of example, whether it's our own or somebody that we know, who had what seemed to be an unlucky moment that actually turned into a blessing in disguise. I have had times in my life where, I've lost my keys and I'm running late. And then you find out later that there was an accident on a street that you would have been on, right? So sometimes these supposedly unlucky moments of, the stress of losing my keys and trying to find them and get out of the house and now I'm going to be late actually were a blessing in disguise. So we have to remember that and we have to be grateful for those moments when we do recognize them. Another sort of faith-based resilient shift you can do is, as I've already mentioned, is kind of switching that thinking of, instead of why does this always happen to me, shift to what can I learn from this? And if you find yourself saying, I have the worst luck, everything bad always happens to me, shift to saying something like, God's got me no matter what. The power of gratitude and faith is huge. And we're going to talk more on this program about the idea of neuroplasticity and how your brain actually can rewire. But choosing gratitude is one of those ways that you can do that. So trust God instead of fearing bad omens. Remember, you are not cursed. Your life is not controlled by luck, and you have the power to choose faith over fear. Reframe those bad luck thoughts this week with faith and try replacing the I have the worst luck thoughts with I trust God's plan. And if you do this, I would love it if you would come over onto Instagram. My username is Melly Williams. Share a story with me. Let me know a time when you had an unlucky situation that turned into a blessing, or let me know about something that you were able to reframe, a thought that you were able to replace with something positive. Subscribe, share, tag me on Instagram if this episode spoke to you. And until next time, be well, friends. Thank you for listening to this episode of Diamonds in Dumpster Fires. Stay tuned for the next episode where we'll dive into more of life's big topics with a sense of humor and without toxic positivity. Please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you could leave a review, that helps the show reach more people and change more lives. Thank you so much.